Never killed a man or had one killed before, but it is the right move in this case. Donald Trump wasn't even the first candidate to offer a pardon. This whole Silk Road thing, it just taints everyone involved seemingly. Silk Road! So recently I was on Instagram and I saw a picture of this dude with bloodshot eyes and a small little houseplant walking away from what seemed like a 10-year life sentence in maximum security prison. And, well, the truth may not be too far off from that, to be quite honest. I'm sure you heard about the recent news about the onslaught of pardons that were just executed over the past week during Trump's inauguration. However, today we're going to be focusing on one in particular, and that would be Donald Trump's pardon of Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the infamous dark web website, the Silk Road. Today we're going to be digging into the past of Ross Ulbricht and Trump's potential motivations for the pardon, guys. Welcome to Peablar TV 2. I'm your boy Peablar. Let's jump right in. Ross William Ulbricht was a born and bred Texan, born in Austin on March 27th, 1984. In Ross's early days, he seemingly set his sights high, excelling in his schooling and even becoming an Eagle Scout. Once in high school, Ross would pick up a habit of smoking some shrub, you know, the marijuana. But regardless, Ross Man, which was his supposed nickname at the time, kept his mind sharp and scored a staggering 1460 on his SAT, which, if you're not familiar, that's a pretty smart guy. Ulbricht ultimately graduated high school in 2002 and would later attend the University of Texas in Dallas on a full scholarship, ultimately graduating in 2006 with a bachelor degree in physics. But that's not all, folks. He then received an additional scholarship to attend Penn State, where he enrolled in a master degree program in material science and engineering. So this guy was like, you know, full white coat. He was good to go, bro. He had multiple scholarships, and he's clearly had his sights set in this scientific field. He also studied crystallography, which I didn't even know was a thing, to be quite honest. Crystallography is a branch of science devoted to the study of molecular and crystalline structures and properties. And, you know, it's kind of sus considering he facilitated a site that sells crystal meth. I don't know, maybe he just likes geometry, like the prismatic shapes of the crystals or something. Ross, if you're watching this, bro, you gotta play this game. It's called Geometry Dash. You're gonna love it, brother. I'm telling you. Download it. You don't need a VPN either. Anyway, while in Penn State, Ross would also run into a girl named Julia V. I think that's how you pronounce it. V, something like that, who would become his lover for the following years. And apparently, he even used his crystallography knowledge to grow her crystal and created a ring for her. And the two were madly in love for the time being. See, Ross was at a standstill in his life at this point. He had become tired of the mundane monotony of lab research and was searching for something greater, to be quite honest. During this time, he began experimenting with psychedelic drugs and also began exploring the ideologies of Eastern philosophy. Becoming further and further unenthused, Ross would vocalize his disdain in the field of science and wanted to switch fields. Ross became more sour towards the structuring of what he saw as an authoritative system as well at this time. He began to see the government and taxation as a form of coercion enforced by the state. His thinking would become heavily influenced by the Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, who said in the book Liberalism, which was published in 1927, individual liberty, private property, free markets, and limited government coercion are all necessary to facilitate a peaceful and prosperous society. And to that, I say, yeah, it seems really easy to agree with right off the bat. However, libertarianism seems to be a slippery slope, as we'll see in the rest of Ross's story here, because, you know, you give these people an inch and they may take a mile. I think that it's very easy to get carried away with this type of ideology, which unfortunately is what wound up happening with our man Ross Man. One of Ross's new interests was economics. I don't know, maybe he was like trying to hoard some cash or something and then just not pay taxes on it. I don't know what the idea was, but that would ultimately be his next venture, and he would start day trading. And ultimately, he lost a ton of money and it fell flat really quickly. And with that being said, to all the crypto bros out there who are watching this, I'm sure Ulbricht would not condone meme coins to to you guys. I just want to make that clear. Honestly, as of writing this script, I was like, I bet that there's gonna be a Silk Road meme coin out there, and I'm sure that it pumped. Like it like as soon as he got out, I'm sure it like it skyrocketed or something. And surely enough, there is a little spike there as of me writing this script. Looks like it may be tripled. I'm not sure exactly how to read these charts. I'm sure I'm reading it wrong, but whatever, dude. Ross ultimately failed in his day trading ventures, as I stated before, and also failed at starting a video game company, two ventures of which just fell flat, to be quite honest. It seemed like Ross's career choices were taking a rocky turn, and maybe the choice to leave the safe field of science that he spent so much time working towards was the wrong decision after all. However, to add insult to injury, his relationship with Julia was equally as rocky at the time, with the two of them having frequent breakups. Not only was Ross worried about his future of career, but now the future of his relationship as well. On a brighter note, after Ross failed twice in two business ventures, his neighbor Donnie Palmertree invited him to work at his company, Good Wagon Books, which collected a bunch of used books and sold them on platforms such as Amazon. Ross created the Good Wagon platform and wrote a bunch of custom scripts that determine like book pricing based on Amazon ranking. He was able to learn a lot of knowledge about coding websites. And even though it seemed clear that Ross was getting familiar with the ins and outs of creating an online marketplace, he also was hands-on with this wagon store. He learned inventory management, and he actually dealt with all of the physical books as well. Just as things seemingly were getting better for Ross, him and Julia ultimately broke up in the summer of 2010, leaving him heartbroken. And apparently, like, he went on a date on Plenty of Fish or something, and he told some woman that he was absolutely heartbroken, and somehow she went on record saying that, so he was pretty torn up over it. Some time passes, and Ross's neighbor Palmertree wound up getting a new job in Dallas and decided that it was time to leave Good Wagon to Ross, so he packed up and went, finally giving Ross the opportunity to be in charge of something. He began overseeing 5 college students who would sort through tens of thousands of books, and Ross himself even installed all of the shelving that the books would, reside on, which is an important detail for later. In the Good Wagon's best months, Ross was able to clear $10,000, and that was in December. However, Ross was still not satisfied. Ross was thinking back on his day trading days and remembered learning about Bitcoin and was allured by this idea. The decentralized framework of Bitcoin perfectly aligned with Ross's growing libertarian stances, a stance that is now including the idea that drug use is a personal choice, which is probably where my agreement with Ross would stop. Like that is the final thing. Obviously, it's your choice if you want to do drugs or whatever. He took it to a little bit of another extreme, selling heroin and cocaine and things like that on his website. However, it was clear that Ross was becoming slightly more and more radicalized by his ideology. And so Ross wrote in his journal, "The idea was to create a website where people could buy and sell anything anonymously with no trail whatsoever that could lead back to them." And there it was, the birth of undergroundbrokers.onion. That was apparently the initial name that he was going to go with. It was going to be Underground Brokers, but ultimately Ross settled with the Silk Road. At the time, he was still running Good Wagon, but he was getting all the coding and such in order for the eventual launch of Silk Road. And well, the timing couldn't have been better, because one night early in 2011, the Good Wagon warehouse would literally collapse due to Ross. Apparently, when Ross installed those shelves I mentioned earlier that held all of the books in place, he missed 2 vital screws for the entire system, and everything collapsed because of it. Apparently, he designed the shelves as well, so the fault is all his, to be quite honest. There's no sugarcoating it at all. With the entire warehouse collapsing, Ross had to break the news to Palmertree, and he told him that his heart wasn't really in the business anymore. So they both agreed to close the company and move on, and Ross even told Palmertree that he had something really big coming. Wasting no time at all, Ross launched the Silk Road mid-January of 2011 and sold 10 pounds of psychedelic mushrooms that he grew himself, gaining a few buyers on the site and and sellers alike. Things were really looking up at this point for Ross, and his life was in a direction that he was actually looking forward to for once. Just before launching the site, Ross wrote to himself, "In 2011, I am creating a year of prosperity and power beyond what I have ever experienced before. Silk Road is going to be a phenomenon, and at least one person will tell me about it, unknowing that I was the creator." Over the course of the next 2 years, Ross would operate and expand the Silk Road, pouring all of his energy into his passion project. The full story is honestly so interesting and has a lot of twists and turns, so I highly suggest that you guys give this short story that I read up on a read. But to sum things up, any way you cut it, running the Silk Road and becoming a kingpin in the criminal marketplace sphere undoubtedly hardened Ross as a person. As the site grew in popularity, the money was rolling in. Off-site commissions alone, Ross was earning an annual income of more than $7 million. This newfound success undoubtedly got to Ross's head, and he began making posts on the Silk Road so he could directly communicate with the fan base that he was cultivating. See, many libertarians hold Ross in high esteem and see him as a martyr of sorts, fighting for the freedom of those around him. Additionally, Ross is really responsible for giving Bitcoin its first real use case. Beforehand, yes, Bitcoin did have its own utility and purpose, and it had some value, but at this time, it would have been considered otherwise obscure. So with these two key factors and communities combining, it was easy to see how a large community formed on the Silk Road. Ross would make these community posts under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, derived from the pirates in the movie Princess Bride. And it was a fitting name at that. In the Princess Bride movie, Wesley, among other pirates, used the Dread Pirate Roberts identity and his reputation to intimidate their opponents. And like I mentioned before, operating behind the veil would take a toll on Ross, undoubtedly. What started off as an experiment in personal choice and freedom quickly became a slippery slope, exposing many cracks in Ross's moral standing. See, he had an outline on Silk Road when it started, and they sold things like drugs and fake IDs and other illicit items. However, he did say that you weren't allowed to sell anything to defraud people, or you weren't allowed to sell anything to harm people. You also weren't allowed to sell any, sketchy content such as CP, if you know what I mean. But for starters, facilitating the largest criminal marketplace is pretty bad regardless. However, behind the scenes, things were growing more and more dangerous. One of Ross's admins mentioned that the site should have safeguards, such as, something like an age verification that limits minors from accessing the site, considering that they were selling drugs and fake IDs. But to that, Ross said, "That's my whole idea," and that was it. So clearly he was taking things a little too far in that regard. Another situation was when one of the site's more tech-savvy users mentioned to Ross that he should know where the physical servers were actually located, because if found, they could be copied. However, Ross brushed this aside, and his feelings of invincibility grew stronger, constantly saying things such as, "There's no way that the Silk Road can be found, and there's no way that your information can be found." Now let's talk about the worst crimes that Ross committed. Ross was communicating with multiple users on the platform, one of which his name was Green, and Ross suspected Green of stealing $350 worth of Green, or, $350 worth of Bitcoin. And he was also worried about him spilling the beans because he found out that he was arrested after being absent from the Silk Road for a few days. Ross reached out to another user by the name of Knob, who had formed a strong bond with Ross over the past few months, and asked him for a favor. "Do you want him beat up, shot, or just paid a visit? I'd like him beat up, then forced to send the Bitcoin back to me. Not sure how these things usually go. How quickly do you think you can get someone over there, and what does it cost you? Okay, so can you change the order to execute rather than torture? He was on the inside for a while, and now he's been arrested. I'm afraid he'll give up info. Never killed a man or had one killed before, but it is the right move in this case. How much will it cost? Ballpark? Less than 100K? Have you killed or had someone killed before?" Ross's hitman just so happened to be DEA agent Force, who happened to intercept a drug package that was being sent to Green's house. But even Agent Force himself would later be investigated for having multiple fake accounts that supposedly extorted and stole hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin from Ross during this very operation. This whole Silk Road thing, it just taints everyone involved seemingly. But Ross didn't only order a hit once, he actually did it multiple times, all of which were either scams or didn't come to fruition. The picture becomes clear to me that Ross at this point at least was no longer just some free freedom fighter who happened to be facilitating a criminal website, but rather had become a criminal himself, stopping at nothing to keep his website online in the name of revolution. Playing Dread Pirate Roberts took Ross down a dark path, destroying his own code of ethics when creating the Silk Road. And maybe this wasn't even the revolution Ross wanted in the first place, but rather one where he could be the leader. Nevertheless, Ross wound up getting caught through an elementary flaw where he made a thread on a shroom website called the Shroomery in an attempt to get the Silk Road more visitors. The FBI found some old posts made by the same user on a different website asking about Tor browser related coding questions, and the email associated with the account was rossulbricht@gmail.com, really spelling it out for them, to be quite honest. Once being apprehended, Ross faced 2 life sentences in prison plus an additional 40-year sentence, and for some reason, Ross was never tried for the murder for hire and was only convicted for operating the website, hacking, and other things along those lines. During his time in prison, Ulbricht tried to make multiple appeals in court, claiming that the evidence was improperly obtained and violated his rights. A petition was created to free Ross and gathered over 600,000 signatures, and additionally, his family sold an NFT in 2021 to help cover the costs and get him back, and it sold for a whopping $6.2 million. So things were, happening behind the scenes while Ross was teaching yoga in prison, which, yes, is apparently something that he was doing. But with all this time passing, why was he pardoned now? Well, before we jump into Donald Trump and his pardon, what if I told you that Donald Trump wasn't even the first candidate to offer a pardon? Back in 2020, the Libertarian Party presidential candidate, Joe Jorgensen, made a campaign pledge to pardon Ulbricht. And so that leaves us with the big question, why did Trump wind up doing it? All said and done, it doesn't make too much sense regarding Trump's policy. See, Trump has a strong stance against entities like the cartel, which frankly Ross was trying to get as a partner on the website. Like literally. Trump clearly made a strategic decision to promise this pardon in an attempt to gain the Libertarian Party. Even if Ross was facilitating mass quantities of drugs and other illicit materials to enter into the country, Trump and his team made the calculated decision to pardon Ross in an attempt to get more voters. And even if Ross was a pawn in this political game of chess, it seems to me, at least in my opinion, that his initial sentencing was very heavy-handed. Like maybe the 40-year sentence I could understand, but 2 life sentences and the 40 years? This whole operation of him running the Silk Road only took place over the course of like 2 years. But then again, he was hiring hitmen and all this crazy stuff, so maybe it should be taken into consideration. But regardless, Ross is a free man now, and there's nothing that's going to stop him. What if he just starts the Silk Road again this week? What if it just goes back online, guys? Anyway, with that being said, guys, that is it. What do you guys make of the pardon of Ross Ulbricht? Libertarians and crypto bros alike are ecstatic about it, saying that their martyr for libertarian rights, or the guy who created the first use case for Bitcoin, is now ultimately free. However, after reading about his story, it seems to me like he was willing to do anything in the name of revolution, and even if that means using violent force. One of the things that, Ross initially said was against his code of ethics. Do not harm others. Do not defraud others. It seems to me that he fell into some dangerous ideology and just got carried away with running the revolution from his laptop. It seems that over the course of the last decade, he truly has become more remorseful for what he's done and has truly realized that he's essentially thrown his life away. So hopefully he makes good of this new leaf that he's been given. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Comment down below what you think. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Ross William Ulbricht's life, the new free man who ran a criminal enterprise on the dark web. If you guys enjoyed the video, like I said, definitely consider dropping a like and commenting and joining the Peablar army. I'm going to be posting weird, wacky videos all throughout the year, so definitely make it a part of your schedule, guys. As for me, I am your boy Peablar. It's been real, and until next time, be well and peace.